to the Thought Snob Podcast. I'm Paula Swope. Let's get snobby. Welcome to another episode of the Thought Snob Podcast. I'm your host, Paula Swope, and today I'm sitting here with another Paula, Paula Lafferty. Paula lives in the Kansas City area with her husband, daughter, and Odo, who she says is the sweetest dog there ever was. She received a BFA in film production from Chapman University and a Master of Divinity from St. Paul School of Theology. Now, that's one you don't hear that often. She has a taste for finding magic in the ordinary and a spark for discovering stories at every turn. Telling stories is the thread that runs through Paula's life, and her debut novel, which she originally funded through a hugely successful Kickstarter campaign. And we'll discuss how she raised that money today, but the main reason I asked Paula to come on the show is that she is a person who legit went after a dream. And so many people don't do that because they believe they can't make that dream come true. So I absolutely cannot wait to talk to you about this, Paula, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, just so our viewers and our listeners know, I found you on TikTok. And at the time, I didn't have a podcast. But I'm also a new author who has a debut book coming out on August the 12th. And so I would say that you probably showed up on my For You page because of book talk.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, I would say so. But what caught my attention is I heard you say something and I thought, because what you were talking about was a burning desire. And I always tell people to act on their burning desires, and they'll be like, well, what does that feel like? I mean, what does a burning desire feel like? In one of your videos, you told a story about writing this thank you note.
Yeah.
And it was just something that just popped up, and you acted on it without thinking too much. And I want you to talk about it because it clearly demonstrates what that burning desire feels like, and how one small decision and taking that one motivated action can basically change your life.
Yeah, so that was, I think it was winter of 2007. So I was in college at the time and home for Christmas break. And it was around the time when the Harry Potter books were coming out. And I was really into all of that. Mm-hmm. And I was checking this fan website every day. And I saw this notice for an internship with a company, not anything official, but a company that led these tours called magical tours. Mm-hmm. Through various places of England and Scotland that kind of went along with the Harry Potter theme. And they were doing a contest to be an intern on the next summer's tours. So you would be gone pretty much the whole summer, helping to lead 4 different tours all over England and Scotland. And of course, like, you get to go and you don't have to pay for this experience. And it's not a free lunch because you're working the whole time. But I mean, could anything sound more incredible to a college student? Mm-hmm. So I had applied and then was eliminated after the first round. So I didn't make it on. There were I think there was something like 24 finalists. I didn't make it to the 24 finalists. So I had written this thank you note to the guy who was running the competition, just, I don't know, saying all the things like, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I love that you are endeavoring to make magic feel like something that's very real for people in their lives. And it just feels like a great fit. And I'm so honored to have been a small part of it. And I'll be back next year. And he wrote an email the next day that was like, hey, you were just after our cutoff. And actually some people didn't respond. So do you want to be a finalist? And then I was in. So we made videos and I actually ended up taking second place. But then he called me right before the tours were to start in 2008 and said, hey, I was going to do the contest again, but I'd already decided that I wanted you to be the intern for next summer. And that just doesn't seem fair. So will you just be the intern for next summer? And And it was on this internship that the idea for the story that turned into my book was born. It was a reorienting trajectory. And even in the place, Glastonbury, where the idea kind of like fell in my brain, I knew before I knew why that place and that moment was a life turning point. Like I knew, I didn't know what or why, but I was like, this has gravity and this is important and this is a big moment in my life. And now I know why.
Well, so you had that inner knowing, and just think about what would have happened if you would have behaved like most people. And this is no judgment on my end, because I have behaved like this many times back in the day. But what if when you got eliminated, you got pissed off and got this bad attitude, and see that divine wisdom would not have come to you if you would have had that attitude. But because you had that inner knowing and you acted on it and you just did something, like sending that thank you note, look what happened.
Yeah, it was really interesting too, because you hear a lot of people when you do stuff like that, when you're applying for something or when you're trying for something, you hear a lot of people say like, oh, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. Or you hear people say afterwards, so people say that, and then it didn't happen. And then I wrote the thank you note, and then it did happen. And then you have people saying like, oh, it was meant to be. And it's like, well, maybe, but also I don't think any of this is a passive thing. Like even if something feels like has that grip on our heart or has that grip on, I don't know, your inner knowing, you can't be passive in it.
No.
So I don't know, that it always just kind of rang as funny to me, the way that is talked about.
Because it's a fascinating story, and it is a prime example of how your life purpose will show up, and those messages will come in situations when you least expect it. And in those moments of rejection, it shows up during those moments. And it's like, how much control do we have over our emotions? Because if you would have spiraled over that rejection, then a huge opportunity would have been missed. So those opportunities hide in those no's, and I always stress that to people.
Oh gosh, I agree completely with that.
15 years ago, am I right? You had a dream of writing a book, right? And you had a brilliant idea for a story, and initially you were filled with excitement, but I got the impression, based on what you said in one of your videos, that something was just holding you back. Do you know what that was at this point?
Oh, for sure. So initially, I wrote a couple pages, and it's so funny to look. I still have the journal that I wrote the initial notes and ideas in, and even like so many of the elements stayed exactly the same, even though I didn't see that notebook for like a solid decade. When I first started writing it down, I was so excited, I was so energized, and then a couple of things happened. I decided I wasn't a good enough writer. I started feeling a lot of doubt of like, well, I thought this was a great idea, but maybe it's actually terrible. Maybe there's not really anything here. And yeah, so I just entirely lost faith in myself. And I mean, I can look at that now. I'm 36. I was 21 when the idea happened. And just the amount of growth that I think occurs naturally and that can also occur with intention during that time period is astronomical. I mean, I look back and know how insecure I was on a really deep level. And I don't feel that way anymore. And I think that was a really big part of unlocking things, was just finding a way to believe in myself and my ability and my story. And also, I'm sorry, I'm like tangenting around in this wild forest of tangents.
Go for it. I go for it. I love it. It's all
okay,
it's
great.
all relevant.
I love it.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Then also, there were a couple of things that sort of started unlocking the floodgates. Like I read Liz Gilbert's book, Big Magic. And I don't know if you've read it, but there is a lot of conversation about at what point in our lives did we start believing that something has to be perfect or even good in order to be worthy of existing. And so it wasn't even so much like believing, oh, I'm a great writer. That came later. It wasn't believing I'm a great writer. It was believing that, like, because I want to create something and I love it and I'm passionate about it and I'm pulled to it, that is actually, in fact, enough. Like, I don't have to be great at it. It doesn't have to be good in order to be worthy of existing. And for some reason, I don't know, that helped me rewire the way I thought about things. And it brought a lot of joy to the creative process.
I think that all authors go through that. I mean, I know that I have 1,000 times. It's just like it's ingrained in our subconscious because it's just, and it's things that you've been told. I mean, how many times have you heard and still hear, authors are considered like, starving artists. You get in those self-publishing like support groups like on Facebook and stuff, and what do you see? It is gloom and doom. It is horror stories. Yeah. You tell people you're publishing a book, and some people will be like, "Good God, good luck," because authors don't make any money. You hear all of that stuff, and it's just for some reason easier to believe than what you know about yourself. And how many bad books have been bestsellers?
Yeah, and how many great books have never been written because somebody was afraid.
Right. I knew that you were the perfect person to talk about this. You paid attention to that stuff for a bit, but then you were like, no, you let your divine wisdom come in and you let your creativity prevail and you didn't worry about all that shit. And that's exactly what I ended up doing too. And it's like,
I love that.
And if and you wouldn't have had the idea for the story if you weren't meant to write it. And that's the piece of it that people just don't get. And that's why it's like, our next Van Gogh might be stashed behind the cash register somewhere right now saying, do you want fries with that? Because they don't have the guts to pursue what they're really meant to do. And so all of this is very inspiring. So any tangent that you want to go on is fine with me, because I absolutely detest the thought of someone giving up on their dream, and you pursued yours and you made it a reality. What would you say to those who are listening, and they may feel that their dream isn't worth pursuing? I mean, what would you say to those people?
Oh gosh, so many things. Because I've stood on the side of this this is not the first book I've tried to write. I knew it was the right one the second I really started writing it, but I'm sitting in a room with a tub of old journals and notebooks that my mom gave me when she was finally like, you're a grown-up, get your shit out of my house. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a graveyard of stories that never got finished. I mean, I would start and I would lose faith. I would start and be like, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. Every time. So countless stories, really. So I've stood on that side. And I know how it feels to be afraid of trying and failing and coming up short and it not being good. And now I also know what it feels like to try and finish the book. And everything else, like all of the rest of it, it turns out is like cherry and frosting and sprinkles on top of it. The big win, the big success was in doing the thing. So just like looking at it from that perspective, I know what it feels like to try and then give up. And I know what it feels like to try and not give up. This will be worth it. Trying and not giving up will be worth it. I mean, there's no replicating that feeling of showing yourself that you can do something that you once thought was impossible. So I would say that. And I would also say, like, it's a really important, especially around creativity, it's a really important thing to shift perspective on failure, which is a hard thing to do, but also a vital thing to do. Because I also used to stand in that place where it was like, well, if I don't try, then I can't fail. When in reality, like, I would never know what could be. And the not knowing and the wondering, the what ifs of it all, oh my gosh, that'll just rot away at your insides, at your heart for all of your life. But now I'm in this place where I'm like, okay, if I try, if I give this my everything, if I claim like loudly to the world, I want to be a self-publishing author on the New York Times bestseller list, and I do everything that I can to try to make this absolute delusion a reality, and I fail, I'm going to sleep well at night because I am never going to wonder, like, what if? So I think that shifting of, like, you're not saving yourself anything by holding back. You're just creating pain for yourself. Regret. I think that is a hard reckoning, but an important one.
And I shifted my perspective about failure a long time ago, because there's the only failure, in my opinion, is not trying. And being on your deathbed in your 90s and thinking, damn it, I should have done that. That to me is failure. When someone tells you over and over again that you can't have what you want, you believe it. And those beliefs, unless they are interrupted, have the power to destroy your life. This book takes you on a journey of self-assessment, self-reflection, and self-empowerment, but it's not a quick fix. It's a playbook to a better life. And if you emulate my spiritual teachings, your life won't look the same 1 year from now. I want you to know that if you want something, you're meant to have it. That burning desire that you've always had is there for a reason. Your intuition tells you that you are supposed to do whatever you want to do, and that's why the burning desire never goes away. You may have shut it out a time or two in your lifetime, but it always comes back. Together, we're going to bring that burning desire to life. You can attract whatever you want, regardless of your past and present circumstances. When we're done with your spiritual transformation, those who have treated you badly will wish they hadn't. Miracles aren't reserved for the saints. We sinners are just as entitled to miracles, so let's go get yours. The most successful people in the world have failed more than anybody. They have fallen down and gotten back up. And I'm sure you've heard that story, and this just popped into my head, about Meryl Streep. She overheard that, I don't know if it was a producer or a director maybe, but she had been to an audition, and I think they were speaking in Italian, and they didn't realize that she spoke Italian, and they said that she was ugly. To Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep.
She could have given up right then. Mm-hmm. And if she had of, well, she might be saying, do you want fries with that? And so that whole failure thing, a lot of that is in the eyes of other people. A lot of it circles back around to how we define failure, and then what other people think, can really shape our perception of that if we allow it. That's one thing that I had to do to, overcome all of the obstacles that I've been through since I decided to pursue my dream and become an author, is I can't listen to other people's opinions. I just can't. And I'm to the point that I'm pretty much immune to what anybody else thinks. But I want to go back real quick before I forget to something that you said, because you mentioned delusion. And I'm always talking to my clients that I coach about the power of delusion. I pulled a quote from one of your videos, and it says, "Big things don't happen unless you allow a corner of your mind to be a little delusional." I love that. And when people ask me about manifestation, one of the main things I explain is the power of delusion. And I think it was in the same video that you talked about your friend Marcus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Marcus imagined being at the Oscars. Now that's how it's done. And then he landed there, he made it, but it all started with this vision, this delusion. What does delusion look like for you, and how has it benefited you?
Well, I named it a little bit, right? At this point, delusion is like I want to be a self-publishing author on the New York Times bestseller list. It's picking the thing that is the unreachable thing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been, the delusion has changed as the process has gone. Initially, when I set out to write chapter 1, the delusion was, I'm going to finish this book. Because as far as I knew, it was impossible for me to write a book because I had never succeeded at it before. And then once I finished the book, the delusion was, I'm going to make this book really popular on social media and get an agent and a publisher and have like the dream situation. And then that one was a little bit wild because then I had a video go really, really viral on TikTok. So like, I'm kind of digressing here a little bit,
okay.
But part of the delusion for me is like pick the big dream and then do everything in my power and put all of my energy behind like what pieces are in my control to try to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So with the idea of like, I want to build a following around this book. I want to get people excited about this journey that I've been on and also about the idea of this book, which meant like, okay, I'm going to have to be vulnerable and I'm going to have to get online and talk about my story, even though people might hate it. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking ahead and always like making videos and like the video that I had that went the most viral was me flopping down my chapters one after the other. And I would print them and film myself flopping it down in real time as I wrote it. And along the way, I was like, I think this is really cool because I found it really motivating and energizing and it made my heart go, ooh, fluttery. But I hoped it would do well when I posted that video after I finished the book, but I had no idea what it would actually do. So like then it was, all right, the book has some momentum. I've got some momentum here on the internet. Like now I want the dream thing. I want the like Alex Astor situation where a publisher sees the book and buys it. And I'm so like that delusion didn't happen, but I learned about different delusions I could dream about. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, it's this wild thing of like, just like writing a story, you have an idea of where you're going and you have a plan and you have this plot and you know how this book's supposed to look. But if you can hold it loosely enough and not just like have a chokehold on it, sometimes it's got a life of its own and you can find new paths to go on that maybe work better than the other one. Mm-hmm. So I think the sum up of the meandering path I just took you on is that delusion to me is finding the big dream that keeps you moving from where you are right now and putting all of your energy and everything that you've got behind striving toward that. And just kind of like my word of the year is believe from, the Ted Lasso show. So I think of that every time I start to feel doubtful or I start to lose faith in myself or the story or what could happen. And I just like consciously say to myself, believe.
That's right.
Keep moving. Mm-hmm. Keep working.
That's right. You just said so many great things. And I want to ask you about part of your vision was, a publisher and a literary agent. What pieces of this have come true at this point? And then the pieces that haven't, has that led to something better?
All of the above.
Well, and I kind of know the answer. I just want other people to hear.
Yeah. And I can tell you this now, especially knowing that, like, this isn't going to air within the next couple weeks, right?
No.
Okay. So we'll just talk freely because this is not public information at this point.
Okay.
So I, on that journey initially, I did get literary agent interest from that video. Which was really exciting. And I had one agent in particular who seemed just perfect. And I got so excited. I was like, okay, I'm going to edit it up. I'm going to shine it up. And then I'm going to send it to her. And then we'll just see. But I was not really honest with myself about whether or not the book was ready. And I think if I'd just taken a minute to ask myself truthfully, do you really think this book is ready? The answer would have been no. But I sent her the manuscript far before it was ready. And she had a lot of nice things to say, but she said no. And that was interesting because it was a really propelling rejection. Because it made me think about it made me need to figure out like the work that needed to be done. So it leveled my head a little bit. It took me out of the clouds in, I think, a really helpful way to be able to say like, okay, all of those instincts that you have about what's wrong with this story or what's needed to be fixed in this story, those are correct. So take the time to fix those, and then you can go back to querying literary agents, trying to find a literary agent. But in that intervening time while I was doing the work, I also started dreaming about like, oh gosh, if I do decide to self-publish, like if I do end up not able to find any literary agent, what could that look like? Because I do have an audience now. And so I started dreaming about like, okay, maybe I could do a really beautiful edition of the book and do a Kickstarter for it. And that could help me fund doing publication in a different way. And so by the time my book was ready to go back to literary agents, I had 4 more agents who had reached out and a publishing company. And I decided I didn't want to traditionally publish anymore. I was really excited about the idea of self-publishing and trying to do it in a way that sort of is another road in the publishing industry. That's like, hey, self-publishing can look different from how we've seen it, with various kind of really in the weeds details about like printing and distribution and lots of various factors to make it look more like a traditionally published book. So that's how I decided to self-publish, and that has been incredible. Oh my gosh, there's so many aspects to this journey.
Trust me, I know.
I've never like putting it all in one talking moment in a room is like, I don't know, I haven't done that yet because I haven't been able to. Anyway, so yeah, decided to self-publish, did the Kickstarter. It went really, really well. So all of that was on the road to working exactly the way I had dreamed it would. And then in the midst of that, I had made a video about why I was self-publishing. The audiobook narrator, Julia Whalen, followed me and reached out to me, and she has an audio publishing company called Audiobrary that she started, which is really in line with why I wanted to self-publish, of like, how can we change the publishing industry? So the big thing that she's doing is she is paying royalties to audiobook narrators. So her model is that it splits royalties between writers and audiobook narrators. And because you're not going through a distributor like Audible, you're with Audiobrary. She has her own distribution. You don't have to pay those massive overheads. So it's this beautiful new system. And she said she would want to read the book, and she was interested. And so I sent it to her, and she told me like it has to be a capital P perfect fit. I'm happy to help you find somebody if it's not the right fit, but if it was perfect, I would love to do it. And she had the manuscript, and then when she wrote back to me after she'd read it, I seriously had to read the email like 3 or 4 times, because I was looking for the gentle, no thank you, it's not going to work. And it wasn't there because she had left the book. And so yeah, she's going to publish my book through her platform, Audiobrary, and she's going to narrate it. So all that's incredible.
That is incredible.
And then the other side of it is that after the Kickstarter finished, foreign publishing companies started reaching out because I'd sold books in so many places. And so I got a foreign rights agent. Rebecca Thorne connected me with her agent, and we had an interview that I didn't realize was an interview, which was probably a good thing. And she offered to represent me. And then she put the book on submission internationally, and it has sold in 5 countries. So with Penguin Random House Spain, with Hein in Germany, with Jaguar in Poland, and with Namira in Romania. And and this is the one I'm like, the most nervous about, because we're finalizing the contract with Hotterscape in the UK. So it's going to be traditionally published in English in England and the Commonwealth, and self-published in English in North America. And so anyway, ta-da!
That is fabulous. fabulous.
So, yeah.
And if you notice it, the chain of events, that's what gets me. And that's what I want people to see, because you have absolutely consciously created a lot of success and a lot of things that appear to be good luck, but thrown in the mix have been twists and turns, rejections. It appear as though maybe a door is closed, but it is just a typical scenario of when you are hell-bent on making a dream come true, it is probably going to happen. You know, you do it 99% of the time, people can make a dream come true. And so your story is like the epitome of the whole process. It is. And I want to go back to the encounter that you had with the literary agent, and your book wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me.
Did it really?
The exact same thing happened to me. And it was bizarre. And it was an elite literary agent who represents authors. I'm in the self-empowerment space. They represent, let me put it this way without giving any identifiers. Some of the biggest authors ever, the most popular authors ever, this agent represents.
Oh my.
And my encounter was bizarre, but instinctively I knew that book was not it. Everything, and this was a different book like you. I've written a lot of stuff, okay? But that book needed work. There were a lot of issues, and I just was not quite on the right track. But that encounter led me down the right path. And although it was a big fat no and a lot of criticism, it don't always come in a pretty package.
No, it doesn't.
But it all made sense when I processed it and got my ego out of the way. And I said, okay, I'm going to pivot. And like you, I did not get an attitude with this person. I sent them a thank you email.
Yeah.
And every single ounce of feedback that they gave me is in this current book. Our stories are very, very similar in a lot of different ways. Two totally different genres, two totally different styles of writing. But our stories of how we got here, very, very similar. And I really, really admire you for everything that you've done. This is incredible.
Oh, thank you. You as well.
It's incredible. I mean, your story is incredible. And the audio book, that's wild.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And I do know, I mean, there is, algorithms and location and just a lot of factors that I'm fortunate. And there is frighteningly some aspect of roll of the dice to some aspects of it. There is certainly luck involved, and yet that's not enough. Every time I've seen it as like, oh my, I made a good video, yes, but I got lucky that it went really viral, that it hit at the right moment with the right sound. And now what am I going to do with that luck? Because that's really the jumping off point. Because it could have been like, okay, great, I'm going to wait and see, and I'm going to get the literary agents, which is, there's not anything objectively wrong with doing it any certain way, but from the time I was really into it. I've known this for a long time, but just didn't believe it for a long time. Like, whatever you want to call it, the accident of nature, or whether you want to call it some divine pull, like, I'm wired to tell stories and write. Like, I know that in the very core of my being. And having that and feeling the deep truth of that, anytime something happened where I was like, I've been lucky, I've had an opportunity, I've got to do everything that I possibly can with it. So that's kind of my perspective on how I view those moments, that intersection between luck and pull, call, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, timing plays a huge role in that too. Yeah. So I want to talk to you about Kickstarter. When someone tells you over and over again that you can't have what you want, you believe it. And those beliefs, unless they are interrupted, have the power to destroy your life. This book takes you on a journey of self-assessment, self-reflection, and self-empowerment, but it's not a quick fix. It's a playbook to a better life. And if you emulate my spiritual teachings, your life won't look the same 1 year from now. I want you to know that if you want something, you're meant to have it. That burning desire that you've always had is there for a reason. Your intuition tells you that you are supposed to do whatever you want to do, and that's why the burning desire never goes away. You may have shut it out a time or two in your lifetime, but it always comes back. Together, we're going to bring that burning desire to life. You can attract whatever you want, regardless of your past and present circumstances. When we're done with your spiritual transformation, those who have treated you badly will wish they hadn't. Miracles aren't reserved for the saints. We sinners are just as entitled to miracles, so let's go get yours. Now, I was in fundraising in May of 2021, I resigned from my career in fundraising, and I had been in fundraising and a grant writer for over a decade. And I resigned to do what I'm doing now, and went into what I'm doing now completely clueless, but I won't get into all of that right now. But so I know quite a bit about fundraising, and I had not heard about Kickstarter until really just a couple of months ago. And I've never talked to anybody that's had any real success on there. And I so wish that I would have known about this a year or so ago, because my friend, Dr. Melissa Carver, and myself put together, along with her husband, put together this Aspiring Author Summit for new authors. And we pulled in all these people to talk about, all of the different resources that are out there to help new authors. Some of it is a warning about vanity presses and, all of the stuff that can happen. People prey on new authors, and it's actually pretty sad, messed up. People are out there to really take advantage of a person's inexperience. And
it's true.
It is so true. It's like there are vultures everywhere. And so we put that summit together to help new authors, avoid that, educate, inform. But nobody was on there talking about Kickstarter. And when I heard you talking about that, I thought, dang it, I wish we would have included her in that summit. I got onto Kickstarter and just looked around a little bit. And so it is just like it's just a big fundraising platform for various creative projects, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's it. You got it.
And so do you care to share your story about how all of this, came to fruition? Because you raised $65,000.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, yeah, I want to know. Yeah, I want to know how you did that.
Yeah, well, it started with just that seed of a dream of these books that get in, book boxes or whatnot, or books that have been around a while, then they have a special edition and it's really beautiful. And I was like, well, what if, because I was thinking about I'd love to raise some funds if I'm going to self-publish for the publication process, because in addition to just editor and cover art and layout and all of that, there are a lot of expenses, especially if you want to really go all in on the publication process. So I was just trying to think of ways to do that, and I was like, well, I guess I could sell the book on Kickstarter, but I wanted to offer people a way to support the process in a larger way and get a way bigger prize. And so I was like, okay, what would be the really cool prize? And I just thought of the books that I want to have most on my bookshelf. The really beautiful faux leather bound with the foiling on the cover and the gold page edges and maybe some art in there and some maps. So I started researching okay, how do you make that? And realizing that, oh, in order to make that, you have to do, rather than print on demand where you can print one book at a time and pay for each book, you have to do an offset print run, which is printing a whole bunch at one time. So like you're gonna have to print 500, 700, 1,000 books. So you got to figure out a way to pay for all of that up front. And I was like, well, how do people who have done this do that? So I just started looking it up, and I found some books that looked like what I wanted to do, and they were on Kickstarter. So I found one project by my friend now, Josiah. His pen name is JDL Russell. He's on TikTok as well. His book was on Kickstarter at that time. And I just emailed him. I was like, this is really beautiful, and you have a great campaign. How did you do this? And then he told me, this is the thing about authors, is that every time I've come in being like, do you mind if I ask you a question? People are always like, yeah, come on. Let's help each other out, which is an amazing, beautiful, incredible thing. Anyway, so I decided I wanted to do a Kickstarter, and Josiah connected me to the company that he used to manage his Kickstarter, which was called Merrick Books, and they manage specifically these types of Kickstarters for deluxe editions of books. So I connected with them and decided that that was a great fit, and from there, it was a matter of making sure to build a really beautiful campaign to make it look really professional. And then there's, of course, the odds and ends. I mean, I feel like I could definitely do a little workshop on it about how to run a Kickstarter. But really, the bulk of it is building a beautiful campaign and making sure you generate interest around that campaign, and then being engaged. Because even though I had a company that was managing it, I knew I'm always going to be in the driver's seat of this book. No one's ever going to care about the book more than I do. So I just can't just be like, well, it'll be good enough. Whatever they can do, they can do. I'm like, no, whatever they can do plus what I can do is going to be what's enough. So I think I made a video or a post on Instagram and TikTok every single day of the 21 days the Kickstarter was live. And I was on TikTok live all the time. I was sending out email updates. Every time somebody backed the Kickstarter and posted about it on Instagram, I would share that post and link the Kickstarter again. Because again, it's that we know when we see emails about something that's going on, you don't really see something until you've seen it 5 times. So, it was just a whole mountain of building and staying on it, and then staying on it more, and then staying on it again.
How long did it take to raise the $65,000?
That was in a 21-day period. So from launch day until 3 weeks later when we closed the Kickstarter, that raised $65,000.
Wow.
So, and of course, that sounds... It is absolutely, I don't want to downplay it. It was a great thing, but I also want to be transparent about what that means. I think about 12,000 of that goes to shipping and handling the books themselves, because books are expensive to ship, especially when folks from across the ocean ordered them. And then production of the books themselves, that's going to be another rather hefty chunk. You got to pay artists out of that. You've got to pay your Kickstarter fee. You've got to pay the company that you worked with. So there are a lot of things, but it still was, it has been a game changer for me in how I go forward with the rest of the publishing journey.
Oh, yeah. Because you've already established credibility.
For sure.
With Kickstarter. And that's what fundraising is all about. I mean, people got to trust you.
Yeah, I know. I promise it's not a bad book.
Yeah. That is really great information for anyone who's watching, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a diverse array of projects, right? It's books, it's podcasts, it's any creative project, right?
I've seen all kinds of things. There's board games, just a cool speaker systems. I mean, people come up with all kinds of things that are on Kickstarter, and it really, the publishing corner of it has really boomed within the last couple of years. And, the more we talk about it on social media and Instagram, the more people are using it for that. And that was another interesting thing of, once my campaign was live and funded, and it funded, I was very excited, it funded within about 90 minutes. So once it was fully funded, then you have these people coming in who, like, they found me through Kickstarter, and they just go and buy these beautiful books from all kinds of people. They, like, buy up beautiful deluxe editions of books that they know nothing about, that they've never heard of the author before, and they're like, hey, other people are buying this, I'm gonna buy it too. And I mean, if I had extra income, I would want to fill my bookshelves with those kind of books. So I get it, but it was something that I didn't know was a thing until I was in it.
Right. Yeah, this is excellent information. And so, going into Kickstarter, did you have an idea in mind of how much money you were going to raise? Did you have a number? Had you been thinking about it?
You know, I had, so funding the campaign, I'm trying to remember, I think we set the funding goal of meaning, like, okay, then we can definitely print the books that have been ordered, and we'll at least break even and maybe have a little bit left over, was $10,000. So that was the base funding goal. I think in my mind, I was like, 15 would be great, 20 would be awesome. Anything above that would just be incredible. And I think I wish I had it written down, because I did set mental goals of, like, okay, if we hit 30,000, then I'm not going to do print on demand for my wide release. I'm going to do all of my books as offset print run, which is a better business decision as an author if you have the funding for it and if you can ensure people will order your books.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ifs there. It was like, if I hit 40,000, I can't remember what the 40,000 was, but 50,000 was my mental one of, and this was before Julia and I had started talking, and before she decided that, like, she was going to publish the book through her platform. But I was like, if I hit 50,000, then I'll definitely do an audiobook. So I had these mental ifs, but I hoped it would do as well as it did, but I never expected it to. Mm-hmm. Not once.
Well, I wanted you to go through what your, kind of your thought process was, or what your intentions were, your goals were going into Kickstarter, because for the people who are listening, it starts with one thought, and you ended up getting more than what you expected. And I just want people to understand that if a thought comes to you, you really, really need to act on it. And there are so many misconceptions about conscious creation. There's so many misconceptions, because a lot of people think that you just decide that you want something and it magically appears.
Yeah.
Now, I have attracted some things to me that did appear as though they magically appeared, but that wasn't the case. I mean, there's always stuff going on behind the scenes. You thought about that and you took action. I mean, you put a lot of work into that 21-day campaign.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of work went into that, but it just started with a thought. And it's something
true.
that you thought about and you acted on. And so that's why I just wanted you to talk about that, because it's applicable to so many different things. I mean, with you, it was to raise money to, keep that dream alive and to bring it to fruition. For somebody else, it'll be something else, but it's the same strategy. It's the same, It's the same thing. You think you have these thoughts about things you want to do for a reason, and it's because you're meant to do them. On that note, I want to spend our last few minutes together talking about this book. I want you to tell us all about this book. And so you sent me the e-copy a couple of days ago, and I thought, okay, I'm going to just, I'm going to read this later, but I'm just going to scan it, before our interview. There's no scanning that book. Like, there's no scanning it. I mean, it's not a book that I would even think about doing that. It's something I want to sit down with, and I want to really, really read it. I just tell us everything. Could you give us just like a brief synopsis, and then where we can buy it, and all of those things?
Yeah, so it's called Vie de Guinevere, and it's about Vera, who's living her very unremarkable present-day life when she finds out that she is actually from the 7th century, and she's the legendary Queen Guinevere. So there is time travel and romance and magic and adventure. So it's kind of like, the way I've been describing it is Outlander meets Camelot meets the whimsy of, if you've seen the movie A Knight's Tale. A Knight's Tale has a little bit of flair in there. And I've just always loved the Arthurian legend. Like, something about it has always kind of spoken to me. And I always loved the idea of Queen Guinevere. And in all of the stories I'd read and in all of the movies I've seen, she's always a plot device rather than being a fully fleshed out character. So it's always a plot device between, like, the love triangle of King Arthur and Lancelot, or propelling the plot onward, but not really her story. And I don't know why, but despite all that, I've always just decided that she's an absolute badass. And so I wanted an adventure version of King Arthur, where the image of Guinevere, as I'd always seen her, was the one driving the ship. But that also, like all of the other characters, the Knights of the Round Table and Merlin and all of the rest of it, I was like, well, I want that to be really fun too. So it was the book I'd always wanted to read, so I wrote it. And I've poured my heart and soul into it and crafted it and sculpted it, and it really, I am so proud of the final product. So proud.
I can feel it. Like, seriously.
Oh, thank you.
I swear, I can feel it. I mean, I really can. I really can. And I think it's fabulous. And this stuff just comes to me out of nowhere. But have you ever thought about turning that into a movie or something?
Yeah, I also have my undergrad degree, as you read earlier, is in film production.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of screenwriting. There are, like, I watch it in my head like a movie, and there are scenes that ended up having to get cut because it was like, oh, well, this is a lovely moment, but this is more like for a montage in the film, but it doesn't really fit in the book. Like, so we're just going to set that aside, and I'll leave that in my little file in case we ever need to adapt it to a screenplay. But I would love movie, show, whatever. I think that's most authors' dreams, but I think it would be a really fun one on the screen.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't wait to read the entire book. And so right now it's available for pre-order, is that right?
It is, yes.
And
it's
then,
available for pre-order everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of your local independent bookstores, which that's my favorite place. So if anybody wants to order, I'd love if you ordered from your local independent bookstore.
Okay, cool. And then the launch date is October
29th.
October 29th.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to link all of your information along with this podcast so everybody can find you easily and they don't have to dig for it.
That'd be so great.
Yeah, and then they can find you on TikTok, Instagram.
Yeah.
Any place
Those
else?
are my two main ones.
Mine too.
I'm on Facebook and Threads, but TikTok and Instagram are my favorite places.
TikTok and Instagram are definitely my favorite places. Facebook has a place with me, just keeping up with people that I don't really get to see anymore, friends and family and stuff. But people can be pretty nasty on that platform.
Yeah, it's harder to ignore when you can't just like...
Right. And it's like just crazy stuff out of nowhere. And so I'm not that, I mean, I'm on Facebook, but I'm not as active as TikTok and Instagram. Those are my two favorite places too, because everybody's a lot nicer on those two platforms. And that's the perfect spot for authors too.
It is. It's great. It's a really great author community.
Well, I tell you what, I've loved talking to you, and I knew that I would. And you have the exact same energy that comes through your videos. I think you're fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
And when I get done reading your book, I will let you know immediately, and I will tell everybody about it. Congratulations! This is a really dream come true story, and I'm very happy for you. Yeah, very happy for you.
Thank you so much. It was so great to spend time with you. This was lovely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show, and it was great to meet you, and I hope to talk to you again real soon.
Thanks. You as well.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Thought Snob Podcast with Paula Swope has been brought to you by Thought Snob Media in association with Special Purpose Studios. All production, mixing, and sound engineering by me, Will Swope. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars and leave a review. See you on the next Thought Snob podcast with Paula Swope.